Let's talk about trees in the Bible. Hi, everyone. This is your favorite Bible nerd, R.A. Sweeney. Welcome back to Language of Life for Little Learners. Today, I want to talk about it's kind of a weirdly common topic in the Bible, and that's trees. I feel like in at least my day-to-day life, if I don't have a problem with a tree or something's going on with a tree, I don't really bring up trees too often. It's not something that I just like throw into my conversation. Like I was driving down the road and there were trees on the side of the road, and let me tell you about the trees real quick and then continue my journey about just driving down the road with nothing happening. I don't really focus that much on trees, but think about how much trees come up in the Bible. And so you think about like a lot of places, it's like, oh, well, so-and-so was traveling and then they settled down by these trees in this place, or they were in this forest that this happened, or this happened next to, a special tree that this happened. And so like it comes up an awful lot. And the reason being is there's a whole lot of significance in the ideas of trees in all over the ancient Middle East, but especially in Judaism as well. So I want to kind of touch on some of the ways that people in that region at that time viewed trees, just to kind of help flesh out the worldview. But we're also going to focus just on like, what is the biblical understanding of trees? So I want to kind of do both here a little bit. So the word that we're going to be talking about in Hebrew, my kids love this one because it's easy for them to remember. It is eights. So if you've ever played like Crazy Eights, exactly the same sound. Or if you just talk about the number 8, you have a few of them, eights. So you could say like figure eights or whatever you want. Eights is the word that we're going to be talking about. So if you want to say it with me, eights means tree. And so it sounds plural to us because you've got that s sound on the end, but eights is just one tree. You can have multiple trees as well, but then that'll get a plural ending on that. So an eights is a tree. And when we start thinking about trees, in the ancient worldview, they're actually really interesting. In our understanding culturally, there's kind of just this understanding, it's not even true, but it's this pretty well known idea that like people assume that the roots match the canopy of the tree. So like if you've got a branch going this way, underground there's a root doing the exact same thing. And so it's kind of like this mirror image with the trunk being kind of that centerpiece that everything's mirrored about. And that's not true, for one. Like we've dug up lots and lots of trees and excavated the roots, and it's not even close to a mirror image of each other. But we kind of have this understanding of this thing is growing down into the ground and branching out in all these like tendrils and things like that. But it's also growing up into the air, and it's branching out in all the tendrils and reaching out into the air. And the stuff down underground is soaking up all the water and nutrients and things like that. And the stuff in the air is also soaking things up. And it's bringing stuff from the skies and from the land. It's kind of bringing everything together to produce its seeds or its fruit or whatever the case may be of what it's going to be making. And so there's this old understanding that somehow the trees were this connection point between the heavens and the earth. The idea was that the branches are kind of like the sky roots of the tree. It's reaching up there and grabbing from the heavens in the same way the roots are reaching down into the earth and grabbing. And so there's a ton of ancient Middle Eastern pictures where you see like Egyptian gods or Babylonian gods or whoever are depicted as inside that tree, like reaching out to humanity to offer blessings or wisdom or whatever the case may be. And so there's this idea that trees are how the gods in the heavens connect to us on the land. It's this connection point, which makes sense because even in the Garden of Eden, we see there's the tree of life where God is meeting with his people. It doesn't say that he is the tree or that he's in the tree, but that's the place where he's meeting with his people. And so we kind of have this idea of the trees being this connection point where God meets with his people as well. Trees are also often boundary markers and things like that. So you can do, we don't have time to get into all the different types of trees, but different trees have different significance. So like sycamore trees in Egyptian mythology were like the boundary of like the world of the living and the world of the dead. So where you found sycamore trees growing, you wouldn't go past there because that's the land ruled by the dead, and you're likely to, run into bad things out there. And so then you can see, like in scripture, like, oh, there's a sycamore tree. What's going on? That's kind of a boundary between life and death moment here, and it's kind of cool. Hyssop is a purifier. Like there's different trees that have different purposes, and you can look those things up on your own. Like I said, we don't have time to get into all of them, but it's really, really fascinating. But in terms of how the Bible uses this word eitz or tree, you see when Abraham is going around, he is meeting with God at trees or underneath trees. Like I mentioned, Adam and Eve would meet with God under a tree. When Noah builds his ark, it specifically says that he's supposed to make it out of wood, which, I mean, kind of like, yeah, what else was he going to make it out of? But he's making it out of wood. So he's surrounded by trees when he makes the ark. All over, we're seeing this tree imagery. When we start getting into the tabernacle and the temple, you've got the menorah, which is the lampstand that lights up the room, is designed to look like the tree of life. So we do have a lot of tree imagery that we're using there. But what's also interesting is it's not necessarily just a tree. So when we think about a tree, you've got like leaves and things like that, but the rest of it's just wood. And so woody things get translated, come from the word eitz as well. So if I have a log, that would be an eitz. If I've got a stick, that might be an eitz. If I've got a woody bush, like the burning bush on Mount Sinai, it says it's an eitz. It's a tree. It probably was a woody bush, but they don't distinguish a woody bush from a tree in the language of, at least in Hebrew. So he came to a burning tree on Mount Sinai. It probably was a bush, but it uses the word tree there. When Moses throws, depending on what translation you're looking at, it talks about him throwing a piece of wood into bitter waters and it healing the waters. It's that word eitz. So we don't know. Did he throw a tree in, a branch in, a log in? It doesn't say. It's just a woody thing got thrown in there. And that's where you see like Paul, I think it's Paul, it's in the New Testament, it talks about how Jesus was hung on a tree, which in the Old Testament, there's a law that says, cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree. So Jesus became the curse by being hung on a tree. And you're like, well, he wasn't hung on a tree. Yes, he was. Because in Hebrew, he was hung on a piece of eitz. It's a woody thing that he got hung up on, which makes it really interesting to look at the story of Judas, who went up in a tree and did some bad things after Jesus was arrested. They're both hanging in an eitz. And you can kind of look at how those stories reflect each other and differ from each other and different things like that. So really anything wooden or anything that's a tree, we're meant to start thinking eitz in lots of different imagery. So cross imagery, tree imagery, building with wood imagery, all sorts of imagery. And then we do have those different types of trees had different meanings. It's supposed to be where the deity is connected with the humans. There's so much imagery with trees that I feel like eitz is just such a phenomenally important idea and theme that we see develop throughout the Bible. One other thing I want to point out with eitz that is really interesting is we see them appear as kind of an extra thing on day 3. So on day 3, the dry land appears. That's what God did on day 3 is he made dry land. He pulled back the waters, made the seas, allowed dry land to come out. That's what we've been talking about the last couple weeks. But then after that, it says, in addition to the dry land, he also filled the dry land with trees. And then when we look at day 6, it's the same thing. On day 6, he makes all the land creatures. And in addition, he made humanity. And there's some other connections that we'll talk about as we get into some of that language. But at least now we see that both woody plants, eitz, and man, both were add-ons in days 3 and day 6. So there's at least a little bit of a connection there, and I feel like there's a much bigger connection, but like I said, we'll get into that as we do some more vocabulary through the first few days of creation, and we'll see some of the ways that these things are meant to parallel each other. But for now, that's what I really wanted to focus on, is just let's be thinking about, as we get into these next episodes, like what other connections do we have between trees and humans, because I think there's a whole lot there that we're meant to see. So if you guys want to say it with me one more time, eighths means tree, or like I said, it can just mean wood. So eighths means anything that's woody, like a tree or a bush or a piece of wood. If you guys are enjoying these videos, make sure that you subscribe so that you're getting the weekly Language of Life video each week. If you like these, it helps other people find them, just helps boost me in the algorithm so more people can join us as we are learning some of the Hebrew and Greek vocabulary in the Bible. So I'd appreciate that. Share these with any other Bible nerds that you think might enjoy these as much as I do, and hopefully you are enjoying them as well. But for now, I am really grateful you guys are here, that you stuck with me on a little bit of a longer episode this time, but thank you so much for being here. We will see you next time. Thank you.